My name is Cora Lynn, retired now. Tired too, not from years, but from being invisible in rooms I once built with my own hands. They used to call me strong. These days, folks just call me ma'am and keep it moving. But I remember every plate I scrubbed, every school form I signed, every silent prayer whispered over cold dinners. Raising Vaughn, my only son, wasn't a job. It was a vow, one I kept, even when I had nothing left for myself. Mothers like me, we don't ask for much. Not applause, just respect. Not gifts, just a seat at the table we helped build. But it seems like the world only notices us when we're gone or when we're needed. We learn to swallow our hurts, tuck away our bruises under quiet smiles, because our children's pride matters more than our pain. I used to believe that love would return in full, like harvest after sowing. But lately, something in me has gone quiet. Something watching, waiting. I just keep telling myself, don't be dramatic. He loves you. He must. The phone rang just as I was folding towels. Vaughn's name lit up the screen like a command. His voice, when it came through, was smooth. Too smooth. Formal, even. Like I was a client. "Mother," he said, "I'd like to invite you to a celebration dinner. This Thursday evening. At the restaurant. Legacy Bistro. His pride and joy. My old dream, renamed and remade in his hands. I hesitated. Celebration? Yes, he said. It would mean a lot if you came. And behaved appropriately. Behaved appropriately. I pressed the phone to my chest for a second. Took a breath. Then back to my ear. Of course, baby. I'll be there. Maybe this was it. Maybe he was finally ready to honor the years I gave him. Maybe he'd call me Mama again, like when he used to fall asleep on my lap. Maybe, but that word, appropriately, stuck in my ear like a splinter. I stood at my window later that evening, watching kids ride bikes up and down the block. I remembered the first time Vaughn brought home a spelling bee ribbon. I taped it to the fridge like it was a Nobel, but the ribbon didn't feed us. What did was me, at midnight, up to my elbows in soap suds at the diner. What did was me eating ice cubes so he could have lunch money. He doesn't know I kept the first menu he ever drew. He was 10, called it Mama's Kitchen. Crayon smudged, but full of love. That dream, my dream, got buried so he could eat, so he could dream louder than me. Still, maybe he's proud now. Maybe this dinner is his way of saying thank you, even if his mouth won't form the words. Thursday came fast. I stood in front of my closet, fingers brushing past sequins and lace, too loud, too desperate. I chose a beige dress. Simple. Dignified. Like a mother should look. Present, but not competing. I slipped on my shoes and practiced my smile in the mirror. Practiced small talk, just in case I embarrassed him. Maya Angelou once said, "I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. I said that to myself before walking out the door. A prayer, really. Let me bring peace, Lord. Let me not shame him. But deep inside, a cold knot throbbed, like an old wound stitched too tight. The drive to Legacy Bistro traced memories. The street corner where Vaughn took his first steps, now a gas station. The church where I sold sweet potato pies for his graduation suit, now boarded up. But I remembered it all. He might have forgotten, but I hadn't. I parked a block away, wanted to take it in slow, see the place I'd heard so much about, the one with 5-star reviews and celebrity shout-outs, his restaurant, our legacy, if he still saw me in it. The hostess looked up when I entered, young, polished, and already dismissive. Name? Cora Lynn Hayward. She scanned her list, frowned. I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't see you here. I blinked. Could you check again, please? I'm Vaughn Hayward's mother. He invited me. Her smile came out sideways. Are you sure you're invited? My stomach sank, not because of her words, but the way she said, mother, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I'm sure, I said, holding her gaze steady. Please just tell him I'm here. Minutes passed before he appeared. Vaughn, In a tailored navy suit, collar crisp, shoes gleaming, he looked expensive, like someone else's son. He spotted me and approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mother, you're early." I nodded. "Didn't want to keep you waiting." His eyes dipped to my dress, then to the hostess, then back to me. "Just don't draw attention tonight," he said quietly. "This night isn't about the past." And just like that, I felt myself shrink, not physically, but like a shadow folding in on itself. I nodded again, because I've learned, sometimes silence is the last weapon a mother holds. But inside me, something turned. A part of me, not bitter, but awake. If this night was a test, then Lord help me, I wouldn't fail it. I followed Vaughn past the velvet rope into the private dining room, heels muffled by the thick carpet. The jazz playing was soft, intentional, like it knew to stay in the background. Gold-trimmed glasses sparkled under low pendant lights. The table was long, draped in white linen, crowned with small votive candles. Everything screamed success, wealth, precision. His success. I counted 13 people already seated, none of them blood, none of them kin, suits and silk, diamonds flashing when they reached for wine, faces I'd never seen before, faces that looked at me like I wandered in from the wrong door, smiles thin as paper. Nobody asked who I was. Vaughn gestured with a rehearsed ease. "Everyone, this is Cora," he said, tone polite but hollow. "She supported me back in the early days." That's how he said it. Not my mother, not the woman who raised me on grit and God. Just Cora, a supporter. I swallowed a breath and smiled like I hadn't just been stripped of my name. He moved on before I could respond, already clasping hands with a banker, pouring charm like wine. I glanced at the place cards. My name was printed small and tucked all the way at the far end of the table, next to the swinging door where servers came in and out like a rhythm section. Everyone else was clustered near Vaughn. He sat at the head, of course, basking in the glow. Me? I was tucked by the kitchen, beside the hum of utility. He put me where they bring out the food, I whispered to myself, not where they serve the honor. Most folks didn't look my way, but one woman did. Older, round face, a chef's coat under her blazer. Her eyes met mine, and in them, I saw a flicker of something close to an apology. I sat down quietly. Dignified. This wasn't my night. I wasn't a guest. I was part of the decor. Like an old photo frame in the hallway, seen, not celebrated. A younger man beside me leaned in. "Did you used to work here?" His tone wasn't unkind, just unaware. "In a way," I said, holding my voice steady. "I helped build it." Before he could ask more, Vaughn's voice cut in from across the table. "Mom's got stories, y'all," he said, laughing lightly. "She romanticizes everything." Laughter followed. Light, easy, unbothered. My jaw tightened. The wine I sipped tasted like copper. The young woman next to me, mid-20s maybe, looked sideways and whispered, "You deserve better." Her voice was soft, but the words hit hard. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Her eyes reminded me of mine when I still believed being good was enough. Vaughn rose from his seat and tapped a glass with his fork. "Family," he said. "Chosen family, I mean." He thanked his investors first, then his business mentor from culinary school, even his ex-girlfriend from college, who taught me class, he added, with a wink. Not once did he say my name. Not once did he nod in my direction. My smile stayed, but my insides burned. I held the stem of my wineglass so tightly I thought it might crack. I was invisible at my own child's altar of gratitude. Then came the slideshow. Pictures of the restaurant over the years, the first draft blueprints, the renovation, the grand opening. Then, mid-transition between slides, a photo popped up, not meant to linger. It was me, 20 years younger, back bent, mop in hand, cleaning the floors of his first cafe location. No caption, no name, no mention. A murmur rippled. Was that her? Vaughn waved it off. Old memories, he said quickly, clicking to the next slide. I sat still, like that photo. No context, just background. I felt the heat rise, not shame, fury. But then I heard Big Mama's voice in my head, plain as Sunday morning. Dignity ain't about making noise, baby. It's about making room for yourself where they try to shrink you. So I excused myself. Quiet. Graceful. But I walked into the hallway, heels clicking against the polished floor. Found a mirror, looked at myself. Saw the woman who gave everything and got erased for it. He may have forgotten who I am, I whispered to my reflection. But I haven't. I straightened my shoulders. A young waiter approached, hesitant. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Are you Miss Coraline, the original owner?" I blinked. "Yes. Why?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "We've been waiting for you to come back." I didn't speak on the drive home. The night blurred past my windshield, streetlights smearing like long sighs across the glass. I pulled into my driveway the same way I used to when Vaughn was still a boy, quiet and careful, like someone might be watching from the window, but no one waits for me now. The porch light flickered weakly as I stepped inside, and the stillness wrapped around me like a too-heavy blanket. I set my purse on the table and stood in the center of my living room, listening to an echo of laughter that wasn't here. Those polite chuckles from his guests, rehearsed and empty. It trailed after me like a cruel shadow. My house felt smaller tonight. Not in size, but in worth. The walls still held framed report cards and school photos, memories of a young boy with dream-filled eyes. I used to believe that building a child was the greatest legacy. But sitting there in my armchair, hands wrapped around a mug of mint tea, I wondered if I had mistaken survival for success. I stirred the tea slowly. That same ritual I practiced when Vaughn stayed up late cramming for exams. Back then, I thought effort guaranteed gratitude. The clock ticked. Each second sounded like an accusation. I took a sip, but the warmth couldn't soften what I felt. No mother prepares herself for the moment her child treats her as history to be edited. My eyes fell on a cardboard box wedged beside the bookshelf, labeled in Vaughn's handwriting. Nothing important. He had left it behind when he moved out years ago. I don't know why, but I rose, knelt, and pulled it toward me. Dust puffed into the air as I pried it open. Inside were relics of his beginnings, trophies from high school competitions, old culinary school drafts, black and white mock-ups of restaurant layouts. And then, beneath them, I found a composition notebook, edges frayed, pages stained from use. I recognized it immediately. His first menu drafts. He used to bring them to me at the kitchen table, asking which name sounded fancy. I flipped a page, and there it was, my handwriting on the back. "Whatever you build, son, make sure it doesn't cost you your soul." My breath caught. I remembered writing that after a long shift, fingers aching, eyes burning, but still believing he understood. Back then, he kept that paper in his wallet. I thought it meant something. He didn't forget me. He chose to leave me behind. I leaned back against the couch, the weight of that choice pressing against my chest. Memories slipped in uninvited, flashes of when he came home from college, defeated, his dreams cracked, but not yet shattered. I pawed through my own jewelry box that night, selling my wedding ring to put a deposit on the tiny kitchen space he found in Midtown. He cried when I did it, promised me I'd never regret it. And when he opened that first space, I worked there, quietly, in the back, scrubbing pots so he could stand tall out front. Investors came later. But I was his first loan, his first staff, his first believer. Maybe if he had failed, he might have remembered who stood with him during the fall. I set the notebook aside and walked to my desk to check my messages. My email was open from earlier. I meant to log out, but instead, I saw a new thread pop to the top. From Vaughn Hayward. Subject: Rewriting the narrative. I frowned. He must have copied me accidentally, my address barely visible among the recipients. I clicked. Inside, I read, "We're positioning the brand as a solo triumph. No early family assistance, too sentimental. Investors prefer a clean story. Struggle sells, but nostalgia doesn't." I went still. So, our story, the truth, wasn't profitable enough. My sacrifice didn't fit his branding. I closed the laptop, not because I couldn't keep reading, but because I had read enough. A strange calm settled over me. No outburst, no tears, just an understanding colder than any storm. I walked to the garage, switched on the single hanging bulb, and found another box. This one marked Mama's books in my handwriting. Inside were the remnants of my own dream. Brochures I once drafted for a soul food cafe I had never opened. My name was on the cover. Coraline's Hearth Kitchen. Not hidden, not erased. I held that faded brochure to my chest and took a long, steady breath. It ain't too late, I whispered to myself. You built him. Now rebuild you. I returned inside, sat at the desk once more, opened a blank email, not addressed to Vaughn, to someone else entirely, someone who remembered me before he rewrote me. To Miss Eloise Turner. Subject: Let's talk. I think it's time. I hovered over the send button, heart steady. The world erased me once. I would not let them do it again. I lay awake, tangled in sheets, while echoes of forced laughter smoldered in my mind. The walls of this house felt thin tonight, as if the world I built were watching, and no one called me home. Beneath the hum of distant cars and muffled late-night music, I reached out to the nightstand for my old journal. It lay there, dog-eared and heavy with dreams I'd tucked away. In the dim glow of the lamp, the pages whispered back, memories I tucked deep, dreams I once believed in. That house I built, with hopes and prayers, now feels hollow. My breath quickens. Then comes the knock. Sharp. One rapping that tears through my stillness. No voice outside, only shadows, a presence or a warning. Either way, something changed. I remembered that night long ago, the one in his first little restaurant. Vaughn stood before a crowd, trembling with hope. He raised a glass, looked at me, called me his backbone. Tears glistened. He credited me with everything he had, except he never named me publicly. He praised mentors, colleagues, even luck, but not the mother who stayed when he cried, who walked behind him when he could not. In that dark memory, the foundation cracked. I was always half in his story. Later, I learned that he recorded a promotional video. From my laptop hours ago, I glimpsed a slide, support systems. My face wasn't there, logos, brand partners, advisory boards, no mother. That slide replaced my presence with image and prestige. Then I heard his voiceover, cold and clipped. We stood on our own, no past obligations. He crafted betrayal in pixels. He erased me with intention. That was not oversight. That was erasure. I pulled out my phone and dialed him. The seconds felt too long. When he answered, I said, "You can delete my name, but not my truth. Build on lies and the foundation crumbles." My voice stayed calm, controlled. I needed him to hear not anger, though anger was there, but accusation laced with sorrow. Silence on his end. Rain tapped the window pane. I sat by the sill, watching drops trace unpaved paths. I refused to wait for him to apologize. I decided, I will make him answer. A knock at the window drew my attention. I walked slowly, pulled aside the curtain. There was Harlan, shadowed and silent, the waiter who knew. He held a folded napkin, embroidered. That same one I adjusted on that first humiliating night. He placed it in my hands and whispered, "Nobody believed in you but me, and I never sold your name." His voice was low, certain. He left without a backward glance. There stands the gift of acknowledgement in a world that tried to silence me. I switched off the phone. Sit here, chest tight, breath uneven. Tomorrow, I will re-enter the lion's den. But tonight, I gather myself piece by piece, remembering that ghostly silences can become fierce roars. The slide may hide me, but I am not gone. I couldn't sleep. My bed held my body, but my mind was still in that dining room, trapped in the silence that followed Vaughn's speech. That damn slideshow burned in my brain like a branding iron. Slide after slide, smiling investors, kitchen renovations, sleek quotes about vision and legacy. But no mother, no sacrifice, no soul. I sat in my kitchen at 2 a.m., hands wrapped around a lukewarm mug of tea I never touched. The air was too still, like the house itself was waiting on me to decide something. I looked across the room at the guest chair, empty, polished, untouched. The one he used to sit in when he came home late from his shift, smelling like onions and ambition. I whispered to no one. How do you raise a ghost of your own child and still call it love? The knock made me jump. Sharp, not hesitant. I tightened my robe and opened the door, and there she was, Shireen, not dressed for comfort. She was in heels, hair laid, jacket pressed. She wasn't stopping by. She was showing up with something to say. She didn't hug me, just stood there and said, "Grandma, you did for me what he forgot." That was her way of asking to come in. I stepped back, and she brushed past, straight into the living room. She pulled a folded note from her purse, slid it across the coffee table like it was a legal document. Her hands trembled just enough to give her away. "I can't do this anymore," she said, barely audible. Her signature at the bottom was streaked. Tears, maybe. Or regret. We sat in silence for a beat too long. Then came the storm. "You know what he told me?" she snapped. "That you were nothing. A woman who couldn't keep a job, couldn't keep her marriage, living off his name." I gripped the arm of my chair. "I drove you to night school when you didn't have a ride," I said. "I stayed up with you when your mama didn't call. I fed you out my own paycheck before I ate." "He said you were nostalgic," she muttered. "A distraction. You taught me how to stand tall," she said, "but he taught me how to hide." Those words knocked the breath out of me. I looked at her like I was staring at my own broken reflection. "Then stop hiding. You ain't him." She nodded, but her eyes stayed unsure. Then she said it. We were talking about Vaughn, about legacy, about pain, and she said, in front of her friend who'd just arrived to pick her up, "Cora said the same thing once. Not Grandma, not Mama. Cora." That name from her mouth cracked something inside me I didn't know was loose. She didn't even catch it. But I did. That's when I knew. I hadn't just been cut out of Vaughn's story. I was disappearing from hers, too. I leaned back, slow, steady. Let the sting pass through my teeth. I would earn my name back. Later, over leftovers, her phone buzzed. "Trenica." "Of course." She glanced at it, winced, and turned the screen toward me. "A message. Her dress is too showy. Tone it down next time." She meant me, my Sunday dress, navy blue with pearls at the collar, dignified, simple, proud, but not simple enough for Trenisa's fragile sensibilities. I didn't flinch. "I dress for myself now," I said. My voice was calm, but it landed like thunder. "And baby," I added, "you don't ever dim your shine to keep somebody else comfortable. That's how they kill us. One apology at a time." She blinked, swallowed, then nodded. I saw the old Shireen in her eyes again, just for a second. She left with the note still on the table. I folded it, placed it inside my journal, next to pages of erased plans and silent victories. Then I stood in front of my hallway mirror. I looked past the woman they renamed, rebranded, and retold. "They thought they'd see me fade," I said to the reflection. "Instead, watch me rise." I woke just before dawn. The hush of my bedroom felt heavy, as though the night itself was waiting. My heart thudded against my ribs, an alarm I couldn't ignore. My thoughts replayed Vaughn's email betrayal, the note from Shireen, the subtle erasures in his language. No more silent suffering. I stood and dressed in something crisp, the kind of outfit that says I have purpose, not apology. I whispered to myself, "They erased me. I will write myself back in." I powered on my laptop and began drafting an open letter to Vaughn's investors. I typed lines I'd never meant to share, receipts from the first stove I bought, photos of me mopping kitchen floors, snapshots of his 10-year-old menu drafts. I credited myself. "I'm nobody's ghost." I planned to publish it on community boards, social media, church newsletters. I knew exposure was risky, But staying silent was a slow death. Either they see me or see me fade. At noon, a soft launch menu was leaked. No gumbo. No collard greens, no nod to soul food. The list read sleek, upscale, a deliberate erasure of our roots, twist S16. Rumors circulated, legacy rebranding, removing heritage. I held the draft in trembling hands. They're deleting my fingerprints, I thought. My face burned, not with shame, but fury. I didn't wait to stew. I called Miss Eloise, my old partner in those early days of dreaming. I reminded her of the deed securing the land, of how we built this from dust and faith. Then I reached out to faithful regulars, church ladies, church pastors, neighbors who remembered the first small cafe. Would you sign a statement, I asked, affirming my role in his beginnings? Some sniffled, some hesitated, but enough said yes, and I drafted a press release that would run before hype ran with lies. Don't call it his success until you know whose hands built it. That evening, Vaughn organized a charitable gala. Guests received branded gift bags, cookie tins, pens with his logo. But someone slipped a black and white flyer inside one bag. Mom never helped beyond sentiment. Twist S14. My heart slammed. Attack delivered quietly, like poison. Word got around. I heard whispers that people were questioning my significance. My phone rang. People asked if the flyer was true. I refused hysteria. I didn't post rumors or gossip back. I called the publication that printed the flyer. I demanded a correction, public, bold. I threatened legal action for defamation if they ran false stories about me. I messaged through Vaughn's assistant. Spin your facts. Truth doesn't break. My tone was low, controlled. Inside me, a fire roared. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from Vaughn. You picked a war you can't finish. My fingers hovered over the screen. Then I typed, I'm not fighting you. I'm protecting who I was always meant to be. I pressed send. I leaned back on the couch. The walls of this house heard me now, not silent, not afraid. I would walk forward tomorrow, as more than a figure in the shadows. I woke with the same ache in my chest I'd gone to sleep with, that kind of tightness that only grows overnight, like a slow leak in the soul. The kitchen clock said 5:12 a.m., coffee untouched. I sat with every piece of paper I'd collected, old leases, emails, notarized agreements, old menus, the photo of my hand-painted sign from '83, all spread out across the table like fragments of a life they tried to white out. I read them twice, then started drafting formal letters, media outlets, online platforms, local press. This wasn't just a family quarrel anymore. This was about truth. I called Jeremiah, an old friend in the restaurant industry, asked him flat out if he'd vouch that I funded Vaughn's first lease. He said, You didn't just back him, Cora. You built the kitchen. That settled it. My voice would be heard. By noon, news circled that Vaughn would host a public QA meant to clarify misconceptions. Translation, spin the story. I signed up as a stakeholder. No anonymity. I wanted my name on that list, and it was, but not how it should be. Former supporter. That's how he described me. A reporter asked him during the live stream, Is your mother still involved in operations? Vaughn gave a half smile, polished but hollow. She hasn't been part of the business in years. She chose to let me take it forward. Just like that, he made me sound like someone who retired willingly. No mention of silence forced upon me. No mention of being pushed out. Then came the video. Vaughn queued it up like it was his proudest moment. Thank you footage, soft music, testimonials. He listed every investor, mentor, advisor. Faces filled the screen. My name never surfaced, not once, not even in the fine print. Servers, chefs, consultants. The screen clapped politely. People applauded. But inside me, my stomach curled in tight knots. That screen, it was my erasure on loop. I stood, took the mic. My knees didn't tremble, but my breath held still. He says I wasn't involved, I began, voice even. But I wrote the original menu. I paid the first rent. I scrubbed floors after midnight and made the gumbo y'all lined up for. I looked right at Vaughn. Don't rewrite a history I lived just because it doesn't fit your headline. The crowd quieted. Vaughn shifted in his seat. And then, as though karma had better timing than me, the slideshow behind him skipped forward, a photo from back in the day. Me, in my apron, standing behind the first counter. Legacy Roots, 1983. That caption burned itself into the wall. Gasps scattered through the crowd. I heard whispers. Isn't that her? Vaughn froze. For once, he didn't have a line ready. The image said more than any denial ever could. After I sat back down, I didn't speak again. I didn't need to. The room turned on him without me yelling. I had let the truth breathe, and it did what shouting never could. When the session ended, he avoided me. Reporters crowded him. I took the side door out. Cool air wrapped around me. My silence was not surrender. It was the sound of everything he'd tried to bury, rising up all at once. Out in the parking lot, I saw him. Vaughn stood under the glow of a neon exit sign, staring. For just a moment, his eyes softened, like he remembered who I was, or who he used to be. He didn't say a word. I didn't wait for one. The invitation came 3 days after the confrontation, folded in a thick cream envelope, delivered by courier like something delicate and ceremonial. Vaughn had written only a single line inside. Let's have dinner. Just us. No noise. No apology. No explanation. Just an instruction. Polite, controlled, rehearsed. I sat at my kitchen table and read it twice. I knew better than to mistake formality for remorse, yet a part of me, a part of every mother, wanted to believe in the flicker of a buried conscience. I chose to go, not out of hope, but clarity. Some tables you walk into not for an embrace, but to reclaim your place. I dressed carefully, not extravagantly. Beige suit, pressed collar, soft leather shoes. And on my lapel, the old brooch I wore the day we opened the first cafe. His first memory of pride had been born while I wore it. Let him see it again. The restaurant was downtown, glass front, gold lettering, valet at the door. It didn't smell of cornbread or cayenne like the kitchens I once commanded. It smelled of steel, citrus, and ambition. The host didn't ask my name. He said it before I reached him. Right this way, Mrs. Beauregard. Titles return when truth sharpens. Vaughn arrived nearly 20 minutes after I sat. He came with a smile too polished to be kind. Ma, he said, thank you for agreeing. Tonight is about peace. Peace. He spoke like a diplomat arranging treaties. No mention of truth. No mention of the room I'd already stood in, where I forced him to confront history. He slid a silver-banded menu toward me. Minimalist. Cold font. No Mama's Gumbo. No Cora's Collards. Legacy stripped down to market trends. We're going global, he said. Refined identity. Broader appeal. I didn't answer. A few of his guests laughed lightly, someone murmuring, First time she's seen a menu like this, I bet. Let them laugh. They didn't know they were dining inside a story they hadn't earned. Then came the shift. A young waiter, no older than Vaughn was when we scrubbed pots together, bent toward me as he set my plate. His voice was barely sound. Welcome back, Madam Owner. I froze, fork suspended. Owner. I looked at him. His eyes held the certainty of someone raised on whispered facts. He bowed his head and walked away, leaving that one word echoing down the marble table. Owner. It wasn't flattery. It was recognition. That was the first tremor. Calmly, I excused myself and walked toward the host's desk. I'd like confirmation of ownership records, I said softly. The assistant manager hesitated, then pulled up the digital deed on his screen. There it was, Cora Lynn Beauregard, 49% silent co-owner. Filed, 2001. My name preserved in ink even when absent from speech. It felt like touching solid ground after months in water. Not vindication. Validation. A truth too long restrained, finally breathing. I returned to the table. My stride was no longer the walk of a guest. I sat, folded my napkin slowly, and lifted my glass. To foundations, I said. Not the visible ones, the ones laid before the paint dried, often by hands nobody saw. Conversations faltered. Vaughn stiffened. Guests exchanged glances. Without raising my voice, I slid my phone across the table, deed open on screen. Silence followed like a standing ovation with no applause. A woman 2 seats down whispered, "Is that her restaurant?" No answer came. None was needed. The young waiter returned with a quiet nod. "My grandmother used to say this place was yours first." That nearly brought tears, but not the kind he'd expect, not grief. Pride reinforced by witness. I stood, gathering my bag. "Legacy isn't what you name," I said gently. "It's what you carry." And I never set mine down. Faces softened. Some bowed their heads. Even those who didn't know my story felt the balance shift. Vaughn followed me outside, night air thick with unspoken history. He reached for words but only managed, "This isn't over, Ma." I met his eyes. "It doesn't need to be," I answered. "It only needed to begin, not on your terms, on the truth." The morning after that dinner felt strangely quiet, almost sacred. I sat on my porch with a fresh cup of coffee, watching the sky bleed from purple to gold. There was no heaviness in my chest, no simmering questions pacing in my mind, just stillness. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't rehearsing arguments or replaying wounds. I was simply breathing. The street was waking up. School buses growling, children calling out, neighbors waving from their driveways. Life, steady and unbothered. And I realized something. Power had never left me. I had simply forgotten I owned it. I thought about the garden I tended out back, the rose bush I rescued from near death, how it bloomed twice this year, unprompted. Healing comes like that, slow, often silent, but undeniable. No parade, no speech, just proof. I whispered to myself words Maya Angelou once penned. "Still, I rise." That's all I'd been doing, all this time. Rising, not perfectly, not loudly, but relentlessly. It was near mid-morning when I heard footsteps on the gravel path. Vaughn, alone. No cameras, no handlers, just my son. He stopped at the base of the porch, hands in his pockets, eyes heavy. Not angry, tired, human. "I read them," he said. I didn't ask what. I knew. The journals he found in the storage closet, pages written through steam and exhaustion, accounts of double shifts, recipes tested until dawn, notes addressed to him when I couldn't afford birthday gifts. He didn't apologize in words. He apologized in presence, shoulders lowered, pride set aside. "I thought," he said slowly, "if I admitted how much you built, there'd be nothing left that was mine." I nodded. I understood, even if I didn't excuse it. "A mother's love is patient," I replied softly. "But it ain't blind. Sometimes love has to step back, so someone can see it." There were tears, but neither of us shed them. Some truths don't need tears, just air. We sat, not as adversaries, not even as mother and son, just as two people standing at the fault line of legacy. I told him about the scholarship fund I'd set up using my shares, the deed he never thought I'd reclaim, a fund for young Black women in culinary arts. "This legacy," I said, "is bigger than blood. It's about every hand that was told it wasn't worthy to own a table." He didn't argue. He only asked, "You want me in it?" I answered plainly, "If you're willing to build, not erase." Later, inside my home, I opened an old box, letters from customers over 40 years, faded envelopes, grease-stained postcards, Polaroids of families crowded into vinyl booths. One letter read, "Your hush puppies saved my marriage." I laughed out loud, real, hearty laughter, because that was my true legacy, not the building, not the name, the nourishment. I wrote one final letter, addressed to no one and everyone. To those dismissed, disrespected, or forgotten, your story does not end in silence. You are not broken. You are building. I folded it and placed it in the box. My gospel. By late afternoon, I walked through the neighborhood market. Vendors waved. Children ran ahead. A little girl tugged my sleeve. "Miss Cora," she asked, "did you used to have a restaurant?" I knelt to meet her eyes and said, "No, baby, I still do. Just not the kind you sit in. She smiled without fully understanding, but one day, she might. As I reached the community garden, I knelt in the soil and planted a sprig of thyme from my kitchen. My hands were steady. My heart was full. I didn't need a building to prove I built something. I carried it. And now, the world did too.